Mark Arman with VIB TV. We're here today with Sean Maddox. Sean is a candidate for mayor of Vallejo and a relative political unknown, so we're going to talk with Sean, pick his brain, and get to know him a little better. So, Sean, tell me a little bit about yourself, because most people don't know you. You've never run before. Your background, your education. Have you ever been elected to office?
Never wanted to be elected to office. I believe in the system, and I've campaigned for people both in Centerville. I campaigned in Denver, where I lived, in the suburb where I lived, even going back to my childhood in Oklahoma, which is kind of, I think, where I'd like to start, if you don't mind, with quick background, because people don't know me.
Please.
I'm a child of World War II. I'm one of just before the baby boomers. I was born in Oran, Algeria, when it was French North Africa. My father was in the first American invasion, and of course everybody knows about Normandy, and very few people pay any attention to North Africa. And it was Eisenhower's first attempt to invade, and we were very successful throughout North Africa. And he met my mother, a French girl, and the rest is history. I was born, and at 3.5 months, because I'm an American citizen and I was born to an American, so they moved me out of the war zone. So my mother, who had no idea she was moving from a very large French city at the time, Oran, we moved to Oklahoma. And so I spent the next 8 years on a wonderful but impoverished farm with no running water, no electricity. And in fact, everything, when we landed there, everything was wiped out in a tornado. Their tornadoes have been in the news a lot.
Right, yeah.
On the day that President Roosevelt died, a tornado ripped through the Oklahoma farm that we were staying at with my grandparents, and everything was gone. The only thing that survived was my birth certificate to prove that I'm still real, right?
Okay.
And that was found in a field.
Interesting.
So I spent 8 years on a farm. I've had all sorts of background in terms of giving perspective, and I mention that, and the reason I would like to give that background is I have talked to people in this town who say that I should not run for politics because I haven't lived here long enough. I'm not sure how long enough is. I've been here 14 years, and I have a pretty good idea of what Vallejo is, and I'm here to stay. I'm not going to be run out of town by crime and the other problems. I think there's some extraordinarily good people in this town, and a lot of talented people like yourself, and that's not to give you flattery. I think what you're doing is superb. Anyway, my father was a farmer, and we know about the agribusiness. And he couldn't make a living as a farmer, so he went to work for the railroads, joined a union. We moved to the big city of Muskogee, Oklahoma. Just at my 9th.
Been around the Midwest a bit.
Been around. Spent my childhood there, my adolescence in Colorado. The work took my dad there. I went to the University of Colorado. I interrupted my education at that time in order to go into the U.S. Air Force. The Vietnam War was underway. I was working nights and weekends, and I couldn't do both. So I joined the Air Force, and that was the beginning of my whole new adventure.
How long were you in the Air Force?
I was in there just less than 3 years. And
that was during the
Vietnam
conflict?
era. Yeah, I went in the end of November, in mid-November 1966. And the Air Force was an enormous turning point for me because thank God I didn't get sent to Vietnam. I know a lot of guys who did. We lost 58,000 of our troops there.
Right.
I was sent to a base in Italy, and in southern Italy it was wonderful, but that's how I met my wife, Suzanne, and we began a whole new journey in life. She was a Canadian. When I got discharged, I moved to Toronto, got married, worked there for a decade, helped with a transformation of a very large city into a great city.
When you say that, what did you do in Toronto?
I landed because of my experience in the Air Force. I had put on shows. I had been assigned to special services, and I put on shows on the base, and we also brought in USO shows.
So you're a bit of a thespian, a bit of a showman.
I am. Yeah, that was what I wanted to do. It turns out that my son's the actor, so he lives in Los Angeles, and he's an actor, and I became a director of an enormous festival within 6 months moving to Toronto. The Caravan Festival in Toronto. I don't know if you remember. You're from upstate.
I don't know it, but
well, it started. Canada was having its large influx of immigrants in the 60s and early 70s, and I was there 6 months. And someone said, "Why don't you go see so and so and so and so?" The next thing I knew, I was brought in on this fledgling festival. At 25 years old, though, you can afford to invest 6 months, whether it works or doesn't work. It worked. It became the largest multicultural festival actually in the world at the time. Queen Elizabeth came, Prime Minister, Time Magazine, National Geo, and so on, covered it. We stayed there for a decade and then moved back to my home area for family reasons. There was Denver, by comparison, was a cultural desert. There was only one theater versus 46 in Toronto, and so on it goes. So I went into business there, and I made my transition into the corporate world. I went to work for Pitney Bowes Dictaphone after realizing there was no work in that area for me, and that began my corporate career. I left it briefly. They transferred me out here, and that's how I wound up on the West Coast. And then I went to work for another corporation at that time, building a national accounts program. And I stress the business side because people say, well, what are you going to do? The mayor's only got one vote on council. The thing is, the mayor is far more than a vote on council. The mayor becomes a symbol for Vallejo.
Or as they say, the titular head of government.
There you go. So I see the mayor's position as one that draws upon the business experience as well.
Which kind of draws me into my next question was, which was, and you're kind of answering it, is why mayor?
Mm-hmm.
Why not run for council? Again, you still have one vote. We have a strong city manager form of government.
Correct.
And you'll have to do a lot of ceremonial things as well as run meetings and things like that.
Understood.
I mean, for example, are you familiar and conversant with the Brown Act and all the provisions that you're going to have to be aware of?
But I will certainly become more familiar with it. What I was saying about the mayor and why the mayor and not a councilman, you asked me how I got to Vallejo. 14 years ago, we wanted to, and people don't understand this who live here because I've met other people who did the same thing. They wanted to follow their own path and they wanted to follow their own bliss, as Joseph Campbell used to call it. And we moved to Vallejo because there was an old buddy here named Malcolm Tipp. I don't know if you remember him. Some people will.
He
was a
real estate
realtor.
agent. Yeah,
a wonderful
realtor.
guy. May rest in peace. He said, look, I know what you want to do. If you want to cut your expenses, we were living at San Rafael at the time. Perfect time to come to Vallejo. We're poised. We're on the edge.
So many of us here.
Yes. Drew a lot of people
Yes.
here because in '97 when we moved, it was the perfect time for Vallejo to begin to...
I moved here in '99, so
You know what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
I know
the
exactly.
economy in the country was red hot at the
Yes.
time.
Yes.
So we cut our expenses substantially by moving here for housing. My objective was, and you ask why mayor again, I wanted to leave business at some point, to take early retirement to write. That meant I had to learn how to write. That meant I had to tackle the issues. I had become very interested, and I want to be very clear on this because people are not clear. I became very interested in the Bible because for a very long period of over 20 years, I had grown up in the Bible Belt, as it was called, and I had become so wrapped up in the material world and chasing jobs and chasing money and Marin County real estate and so on, I hit a brick wall at one point in the 80s, and I wanted to start making changes in my life. And it was interesting, where do you go? You go back to where your foundation is. And I went back to the Bible. The only thing is I didn't even own one.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out, I bought one, started looking at it, looking for inspiration in the book that had inspired me as a child, and I couldn't find it. But I still wanted to understand it. So I did other things. I started studying mythologies. Joseph Campbell was very big in those days. I started studying world religions and spirituality generally. And I finally reached a point where I realized, and this was why we moved here, that at some point in time I would like to take a whole other look at the Bible. So I spent years and years trying to understand it in terms of mythologies, in terms of world religions, and in terms of peoples around the world throughout history, and had some breakthroughs. So in '02 I left business in order to write.
To interject a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about breakthroughs with religion and the Bible, and of course there are many, I think, religious philosophies that people look to, but it also can be something of problematic in connection with politics, as we've seen with our current mayor, who got himself into some hot water with his comments to the New York Times. So I guess my question is, do you feel confident that you can look toward the Bible and religion to guide you, and yet sufficiently separate church and state and sidestep the potential landmines that encompasses?
Absolutely, we have to sidestep church and state, but what a person is in their own spiritual sense, and I use that word, let me be clear on a definition, I am a religious man, O-U-S versus a religion man. I don't advocate a particular religion. People have to find their own paths. Okay. But because the Bible was so important to me as a child and as a young man, and because it is a foundation of our civilization, they still swear people into office, at court, and on a Bible. I wanted to understand it, and yes, it's badly misunderstood. The first little announcement for my run mentioned that I was a biblical scholar, and I was suddenly thrown into a camp back in the Bible Belt, which is absolutely erroneous.
Well, I think probably in Vallejo there's some folks that are sensitive about that kind of thing.
Of course they are.
Or cautious, I would say. And understandably, because we kind of got a bit of a black eye in the press over some of these things.
Oh, and it's still an issue. That's why I raised it in large part. It's not only important to understand the whole person of who I am and my own spiritual background and why I'm doing what I'm doing now in terms of that writing, which will take me to trying to answer your question, but I'm big on trying to give some background because people do not know me. They have not had years and years of exposure to me. The quote you're talking about, which has been hammered to death, is drawn, as so many things are, out of the Bible in a literal context, without any context of history, without any context of its times and peoples, and what was going on, and why such commandments were written when they were written. They're written down probably 2,500 years ago, 2,600 years ago. God knows how old they are, because they were passed on by oral traditions. Let me just say that I like to think that I'm enlightened. I'm a spiritual human being. I hope people will read my work on the Bible to see that it's deeper meanings, not from the standpoint of religion. If they need that, that's fine. But if they want to look at it from the standpoints of mythology and literature and psychology, then you're entering my realm of trying to take those sacred works, just like the works of Hinduism and Buddhism, and open them up. And that's what I was trying to do, Mark. Now, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, in the sense that I have written 3 volumes that you're a journalist, that need editing, that in fact are being edited, that I hope to publish. I'm in a kind of an uphill battle with publishing, very much like I am here.
Publishing is a difficult business these days.
Very difficult, but we have the miracle of ebooks.
Yes.
And the miracle of the internet, which you're using, which opens it up to writers such as myself. But as one woman who's been this old trooper for the Democratic Party in Oakland, and she moved up here because she wanted to retire in Vallejo. She likes Vallejo, she likes its climate, she likes its people. And this woman said to me, I'm going to make my stand here. A lot of people have been leaving town. I've got neighbors who want to leave, neighbors with children who want to leave because they're frightened. And she said, I'm going to make my stand here. She said, I'm 63 years old. I want to retire in a couple of years, and someday I hope to also serve this community. I'm 66 years old. I hope to publish my books and lecture more on them in the future, but right now I'm taking my stand.
So this is your stand. You want to run for mayor?
That's right.
Okay.
And promote this city because it's got so much. We're sitting in the midst of something that should be promoted.
So much potential.
Opportunities.
Opportunities. Well, so now we know you a little better.
Yes.
We've gotten some background, so let's delve into some of the more boilerplate questions, if it's okay with you.
Try it.
All right. Here's one for you. Redevelopment areas. There are a lot of redevelopment areas in Vallejo. Do you feel that you've got kind of familiarity with redevelopment and how that process works to be able to navigate, understand, and work on redevelopment ideas and the process of redevelopment?
Realistically so. Someone on your site said you don't know Vallejo politics, you don't know some of the details and so on. First of all, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview we're a city manager form of government. We pay people to deal with an awful lot of the details of running the city. I believe in this kind of government. We're not a San Francisco, we're not an Oakland, and we're not a Denver that needs a strong mayor form of government. What I believe we need is a mayor who will take the opportunities here, work with the people that we pay a great deal of money to in city government to make those a reality. But right now we're at a point where we need leadership, and we need someone who will then go. The first thing is safety. We're not going to attract any businesses here. We're not going to redevelop and offer job opportunities for people here. We're not going to grow the tax base here unless we, one, make it safe. And then when we make it safe...
Or at least the perception of safety.
Well, you
because
need to be
Vallejo
safe.
has always had crime issues, and,
Yeah,
and I think it'd be hard to argue that. Although, you know, I mean, we've recently taken some heat on the website for looking at some of the statistics, and the overall numbers in crime are down. We've seen a serious decrease in aggravated assaults, but there's been an uptick in murder and rape. So nobody's saying it's a bed of roses. Nonetheless, that kind of leads into another question. A lot of the community and neighborhood watch groups might have had an impact. Now, people tell me you were involved in a neighborhood watch group in your community. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what your...
And I think, by the way, they have had an impact. There's an article that the New York Times has today.
Right.
Crime has been decreasing everywhere in the U.S.
It's an overall trend.
Except here. The only thing, you had an article...
the overall trend is down, even in Vallejo.
In burglaries, yes, and other things I would disagree. But burglaries, yes.
This year, according to the police chief, I mean, both violent and property crime are down 7%.
He would have to show me more hard statistics on that, because I don't believe, from what I've seen, I don't believe that.
From the police chief.
I read what was on the site, but he did not go specifically. He says overall crime, and it depends on what you're considering.
His memo's attached.
Crime.
He breaks it down.
I would like to. I believe that we have an increase in violent crime. We have the issue of prostitutes. The prostitutes themselves make very good camera coverage, and that's why the news media's been doing it.
Well,
but with them, they bring other problems.
Yeah. I often say that the news media they work themselves into a frenzy over Vallejo prostitutes, and it's really not fair, because you could do much the same thing in San Francisco, and say, oh, look at all these prostitutes in San Francisco. Yes, it's a problem. But I also think that it's overblown and overhyped in the media. So that's
I won't argue with you, because I think they've become poster children for something, and it's an opportunity for politicians to stand out there because they're visible. I went to the red panel.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, let me pull you back if I can, because we're talking about safety, and whether the trend is up or down. It's an issue in Vallejo, and it has been an issue for many years.
It's image.
Yeah, absolutely. We have police contracts coming due in 2012, in July of 2012. What do you think needs to be done there?
We need to really talk to the police. One union leader used I'd rather not use their name right now, but they said we all need to bite the bullet. Pardon the pun there.
They've been saying that for years.
Yeah, we need to rein it in and tighten our belts, and I agree entirely. What we pay the police, and whether or not they're worth that, first of all, I wouldn't want to be a cop. I think they put their lives on the line every day. They may work 20 years and never have anything more than speeding tickets to deal with. They could also walk into something, as I walked into the other day, on the safety issue. Once you have safety, then you can promote the city, as I did with National Account for corporations.
And the question gets to be, how do we afford it? That's the question. How do we make it affordable?
There are only several ways we can do that. The most important way, I think, is we do have to have a new retail tax. And if you remember, it's posted on your website.
I'm not talking a revenue side, but let's look at expense side first.
Well,
in other words, how do you bring the expense under control? We have a second tier consideration from the fire department, where the new hires, there just was in the paper that they hired 6 firefighters. Their pension formula will not be 3% at 50, but I believe it's 2% at 55, so that it's considerably downward reduced pension, as well as some other considerations. So, you know, that is going to take time for that to really affect that, but it is something that's a change versus the police, who got a 6.29% raise last year, and this year they're due another raise.
and I don't think we can afford it.
Okay.
And I hope that the policemen, some of whom I've gotten to know, understand that.
Right.
I don't think you can separate expenses from income and potential income.
Well, I'm gonna
go ahead.
The one thing I'll put out there is
that's what I like about your site, is that you can dialogue.
The thing about and we need both. We need to. I mean, I think most people agree we need to both curtail expense and increase revenue.
Yes.
Both have to happen. Now, obviously, if the tax passes, that's going to be fairly immediate. But most revenue increase in terms of things like development and so on and so forth, it takes time.
Yes, it does.
It takes time. I mean, it takes years. It could take 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Whereas if you are able to control expense, it is a short-term measure. So
it's short-term, but if it isn't, again, if you don't dovetail with the longer term, let me use the next-door neighbor, San Rafael. When we moved there in 1986, San Rafael had very little business. Didn't have a lot of crime, but had very little business. They realized, though, with the trend and growing, that they needed to attract businesses. And we lived there for almost 14 years as well. In the time we lived there, I watched them attracting the kinds of businesses that were right for San Rafael. Some of those are right for this island that we're sitting on as well. The software and technology businesses, and watch them building them up down, starting in the canal area and then following 101.
There have been quite a bit of talk about people wanting to bring high tech here. I mean, that's been knocked around from Mare Island. So
and we absolutely, you know, I threw out ideas and people said, well, blah, 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 and you don't know anything about bringing them and so on. Well, that's just absolutely not true. It's one thing to talk ideas and it's one thing to complain, and there are a lot of people who like to whine. But what you have to realize is you also have to go out and aggressively chase those businesses, and you have to present them. And you have to go and say, this is what we have to offer as a community, and look at this.
Sure.
Look at Highway 37 as an example, which is jammed with people going to Marin County and Sonoma County to work every day, when in fact they could be getting off out here on the interchange
and
working at Mare Island or working in Vallejo.
Sure.
So yes, we need to get the police to say, look, we're going to work with you and we're going to cut expenses, and in the meantime though, what are you going to do?
No one's been successful with that though. I think Osby came into it with the idea that and I'm just going to speak very openly. I think he really came into this with an idea that nobody had properly or intelligently negotiated with labor, and that the situation was combative.
Right.
And he came in with that position that I think, with all the best intentions, that he would be the great deal maker, and that he would be able to be the one to approach them and be able to work out a reasonable deal. And the city gave great concessions. The city waived a number of legal claims and other things like that. And essentially, even in bankruptcy, we really didn't affect the changes that, for the most part, needed to be made. I think I read that on your platform, and I think we agree with that.
And my sense of it, again, trying to be more global, because we get down to the details and you can get lost in details. But if you're running your household, or you're running your city, or trying to run the country, you have to look at the budgetary side and the kind of money. But you also have to anticipate, what can I bring in the future?
Absolutely.
Because we've received as a nation a lot of criticism for our short-term planning quarterly, whereas as an example, the Japanese plan for 5 years versus the American quarter. That short-term thinking has cost this country a lot of jobs and has created problems. We need to have the long-term thinking here too. You talked about the number of years it would take to get companies here. If it takes 5 years or 10 years, if we're not attracting them here with safety, with a change of image, with selling the benefits of this community, other than it being chilly out here this morning, the climate is wonderful.
Right. It's just that my question when you talk about safety is, you know, if we can't afford, then how do you bring? In other words, for example, would you be in favor of bringing more non-sworn personnel into the police department to take on some of the tasks?
Absolutely.
So give me some ideas you have to make that affordable, so that we can say, here we go.
The
we have it.
the position report that's posted on your website, I talk about volunteerism. I've spent years working with volunteers, thousands of volunteers. If people believe in something and you can get them to make a commitment, if you can get them to commit to the city, for example, get them beyond the point where there are people running around town, and I know, and I've talked to them, and I've got neighbors who that way, just say, I can't wait till the market turns so I can get out of here. But there are other people, like Brenda, who works with me, like my wife and myself, other neighbors that I know and other people I've met in this town who want to stay here, who believe that it can change. Volunteers, our police department. Right now, I've talked on a couple of different occasions with a corporal who runs their cadet program for citizens, what I call citizen cops.
Citizen on patrol.
Just citizen on patrol. We have one car that patrols. I believe they are on patrol like 8 hours a week. Where we could have them on patrol every day. It takes time, and it takes effort on the part of people to commit to doing that. We do have to have more patrol cars. We do have to have more volunteers to do everything from taking reports and answering phones to manning the front desk at the police department to out patrolling. Have you ever seen the patrol car that I'm talking about?
Yes, yes, I'm familiar with it.
In 14 years, I saw it once. And I would like to be able to see those cars in our neighborhoods and driving up and down Tennessee Street and Tuolumne Street and out Redwood Street to Columbus Parkway.
So you bottom line is you favor that.
Absolutely.
That approach.
Absolutely. It gets the citizens involved. In our neighborhood, we have, thankfully, just like as it has happened all over town, burglaries are down because of the neighborhood watch programs that have arisen. You yourself that had it on your site, that we've gone from 8 to about 230, 240 neighborhood watch groups.
Correct.
I had a call yesterday. A neighbor saw some guys hanging out at the corner of Tuolumne in our street, and we alerted 2 or 3 other people who were at home to keep an eye for it. People looking after people and caring about people and caring about their community is exactly the way to go. So we need more volunteers, though, right across the board. I went to the police department the other day to deliver an envelope, and the doors were locked.
Sure.
Why couldn't volunteers, if they need to sit behind bulletproof glass, that's fine, but the volunteers could be in that office taking reports and handling situations, peaceful situations.
So you favor. I mean, it is one of the things I know that I've heard Chief Nicolini speak about is that it's a challenge to find people that are willing to volunteer or have the time. In other words, having the time. It's a tough economy. People are trying to survive. They need to work. So, aside from budget, there's just
well, with the community, it's very difficult. But you need to be able to go up to people and say, "Look, if you care about this, if you care about your own household, your own family, your children, the future here, and you want to stay here, then it's time to get off your duff and help out." And that's about as straightforward as I can be.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And they will, by the way. They will. That's been my experience. It's hard. It's hard because life catches up with them, but they will do it.
Here's a question about Mare Island. Are you aware that Lennar controls something like around 90% of this island?
Right.
And you talk about bringing business to Mare Island and development. Have you looked at the Lennar Mare Island reuse plan and studied that?
What bothers me more than the Lennar plan is this area sitting out here on the other side of G Street that's sitting rotting, that we're talking about image and about the need to change Vallejo's image. How many tens of thousands of people pass that area and see the dilapidated, rotten buildings out there?
Oh, yeah.
Every single day. And
that is a problem. I agree with you.
It's an enormous problem.
Unsecured.
It's an enormous
for the most
problem
part, too.
And that area, in my opinion, should be focused on right now because of where it's sitting. There are a couple of businesses out there and Alcoa's out there, but those buildings that are collapsing, why in the world they haven't been bulldozed, I don't know. And if nothing else, put a park out there to give a better image for Vallejo until we can find the businesses to move into there.
Speaking about image, what about the downtown? We've had a lot of businesses disappear in the downtown. It's something like around a 70% vacancy. Do you think the city should continue to put money into the downtown to try to improve?
There's the putting into again, and that's why I'm so big on background and understanding root causes. I was speaking with a business owner on Sunday. I wanted to see what kind of traffic was down there, and let me back up.
Or if not putting money, what sort of investment should we make in our
Well, we've got to find out why it's not. Two stories. Last week, I went downtown to become a little more familiar with it in terms of photographs and so on. With my own website. I want to be able to put up your cameraman. I want to put up some of my own photographs. I'm a Victorian house lover. I can't afford one now, but I restored one in Denver. And I've always loved Victorians. When I go to San Francisco, I keep taking pictures of them and accumulating photographs of them. But then I said, we have these incredible Victorian houses here. I should put at least a couple of those on my website. First house I get out to take a picture of with my little digital camera, two guys sitting in the shadows under a tree, and I've been around inner cities long enough to know drug spotters when I see them. This is 1 o'clock, a Tuesday afternoon, in downtown, just on the edge of downtown Vallejo, on Florida Street in Napa, and they challenged me for getting out and taking a picture of the house. What's going on in that house, who knows, or whether or not they're watching for a house down the street, I don't know. They wanted to know what I was doing, why I was doing it, and when I said I'm simply taking a picture because I like Victorians, they got up and started coming at me pretty aggressively. Now, did I feel safe? No, absolutely not. I got in my car and I drove away because I left my car sitting there with the engine running. On Sunday, now back to the downtown, which has had opportunity after opportunity, it seems, lost. Why? Maybe this man I talked to as a businessman down there was open on Sunday, was doing what the woman Levon talked about the other day on your website about the lost opportunities, and why has it been that way? Why do we have that kind of vacancy rate down there? And he had an idea. I think he's right on. That there is an old guard in the town that rather likes it the way it is. They've had those buildings and that space for years, and they're quite pleased with the way everything has been. He mentioned Sears that once upon a time, way back when, wanted to expand down there and were pushed out of the downtown out to Sonoma Boulevard. And then
I'm not entirely familiar with the dynamics of that. Although that's one thing I will say is that there are a lot of popular myths about missed opportunities, and I touched on that, especially in regards to the article in the VPOA magazine, where they listed a lot of missed opportunities that the story, the background, the claim that it was a missed opportunity simply wasn't accurate. So I'm always very careful when I hear these stories where people go on, because there seems to be something of and you know, maybe it's part of that people are down and they're like, well, we never get this or we never get that.
Well, that
for example,
creates a lot of negative energy.
Yeah, and it's a lot of negative thinking. But I mean, for example, the Walmart thing. People are saying the city pushed out Walmart. Well, the last act of the city council regarding Walmart was to improve the economic impact study. It was Walmart's decision to pull out. Now, there were some people in the community that opposed Walmart, but I don't think that was sufficient to drive them away. And it certainly wasn't city government that did it. So that's really...
We should have jumped through hoops to keep them in town. It's
Joe Tanner, the former city manager, he had the Walmart plan, I kid you not. It was sitting up on his shelf as a shrine. As a shrine. And you want to hear even the funnier thing, I would talk to Joe and I would say, Joe, you know, I'm not a big fan of Walmart because I don't like the way they treat their employees. They have a bad track record. And he would say, you know what? Revenue. I'm a city manager. Revenue, 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 revenue. So, I mean, it's a perception that the city chased away Walmart.
Well,
but there's no...
I think it's more than a perception. Let's go back to the downtown minute. So I asked the man, I said, why do you think these buildings continue to sit empty after all these years? And then I mentioned that piece you had, the video piece you had on Levon with the Barbie store. And he said, I think it's because they want to keep it that way. They use it as write-offs. That it's...
That's definitely a possibility.
And he may, and you know what, I think he's probably right on.
Sure.
I wondered when I first started buying books online, I said, I don't know, 1 penny books? I kind of, as a writer, I consider that an insult to the book, but I said, okay, so there are all these penny books. Why would anybody sell a penny book and get reimbursed from Amazon something like $3.99 for postage and handling, and they're losing money on it. Until someone who's in the book business explained that those are going to offset their income, that of course it's business expense. They're simply writing them off. And that may very well be what's going on downtown. Sure. Will downtown change? One, if we make it safe. Two, if we've got the right sorts of things down there.
What about all the pot clubs?
Yeah, I'm not for all the pot clubs.
Okay.
I think what we need downtown is art. I'm very big on having artist studios, and where we need them. There's an artist I encountered downtown who does sculpture. There isn't room for him to work downtown. He needs overhead doors. There are some artists who do need that for their sculptures. And we have facilities here that could be used for that. But the downtown I see as a place for small clubs, social activities that do not attract the kind of violent crimes that we're talking about. Art galleries, artist studios, artisans too. They're the painters and the artists,
Sure.
but they're also the potters and the craftspeople that should have opportunities downtown. We could have little jazz clubs, as an example. We could have cafes and restaurants. Those are the sorts of things that would pull people downtown.
What do you think about the Temple Loft project that Domus is putting in?
That I'm not familiar with. You're going to have to.
It's the Masonic Temple.
Okay.
And that's a historic building, and they're bringing in it's affordable housing and live workspace, and their policy, their
And
claimed
we need
policy,
lots of live workspace for these artists.
and what they say their policy is that they are going to focus on having working artists that have portfolio and so on, and have them in there.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it. As I said, I'm new at this. In 5 weeks as a politician, I'm trying very fast to immerse myself.
And I think I have to say that you know, I like your enthusiasm, and I see a lot of people that run for government with enthusiasm, and even people that have some background, they get in and they really do find themselves overwhelmed by a lot of the mechanics of government, and also the fact that for example, with one vote you have to build coalitions, and you've come down pretty hard on the sitting council, and even after the election there will be at least 3 of them there, which will be Gomes, Brown, and Sunga. And how will you work within those strictures to build coalition, to achieve? You've got a list of goals that's very impressive, and lots of people do, and then they come into city government and they realize, okay, what can I touch? I can touch the general fund. That's all the money I can really touch, because everything else is restricted fund, the water fund, all these other things. You don't have too much control over that. I can only go for one purpose. So they get in there and they realize, okay, I can only touch the general fund. And then out of the general fund, 70, 75, 80% goes to public safety. Public safety being a very important core service of any city.
Absolutely.
So you're left with this very, very small slice of the financial pie and one vote. So the amount of control you have, the ability to achieve anything, is really resting on coalition building and being able to get a voting majority. Otherwise, you're one person up there waving their arms, and people go, well, that's nice, he's waving his arms, but... So essentially the question is, how are you going to be able to work with the other people to get some of these very ambitious goals that you have laid out accomplished? How do you build the coalition, and how do you do it with your capacity to have influence over really a very small slice of the budgetary pie?
What we don't have a small influence over is the image and the growth of the city in terms of attracting businesses. I think that Stephanie Gomes and Marty Brown and Hermes Sunga would like to see the city safe. I think they would like to see new businesses coming in. And I think that you build consensus based on getting beyond the individual egos and the individual personalities. I've come down very hard on council, and then also in a very generic way, because council after council after council, going back to when I moved here, and it certainly goes back before I moved here, have not shown the kind of leadership that is necessary to take the city forward. They don't need to be embroiled in all the details of the day-to-day operation. That's
No, I
why
don't
they're
think they
paying a
are.
city manager. Well, it's easy to get involved in them. You know, in a way, we've had an opportunity here. We could have gone into nothing but details if we weren't careful, versus an image and a vision and a dream. I developed national account program for a major corporation around the country to attract companies like Fireman's Fund, AT&T, American Express, and so on to do business with them. And we had to have the right kind of image, the right kind of can-do image, and the ability to deliver. What Vallejo needs is the can-do image and the ability to deliver to the people we're trying to attract here.
Nobody disagrees.
Okay.
Nobody disagrees.
And so you take that, and you, instead of concentrating at say at a corporate level on tactics, you better start concentrating on some strategy. And I think that people like Marty Brown and Gomes have the capability of doing that. I think, though, what we've always seen again and again, I'll repeat myself with council, is that they get pulled in to stuff which gets them completely off track, almost like calling managers micromanagers.
What about, for example, I mean, you can talk about minutia, but there's also the question of influence. In other words, people get pulled into special interest monies, be it people that have got business interests that back the campaigns, or the unions.
Or the unions.
And I have seen that as a kind of a perennial problem in Vallejo. In other words,
it's a perennial problem in the country.
It is, where you have people that feel strongly compelled to vote in the interest of a special interest group, a group that is interested in their own members or their own enrichment, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And one of the big problems that I've seen is that you get a situation where the voting majority has strong both financial and ideological ties to special interest groups, and they vote along those lines. Now, how do you deal with that?
I gave you a press
and these
release.
are the people to say that you're stuck with to build a coalition with, people that are beholden to special interests, be they business interests or union interests or any other type of special interest, because I will make the argument endlessly that anyone who's elected who is beholden to a special interest of any sort, to an excessive level is a problem. So how do you deal with that? And
don't deal with the special interests, and that is right across the board.
But you can say you won't. But what if you have a council that's stacked with people who are beholden? That's the challenge.
Then you have to be as aggressive. You have to be as.
You can't get a voting majority. It's very hard.
You can get a voting majority if you can really, just like convincing people in the city to volunteer and to get involved.
Right.
I think that if push comes to shove, the people who are in council, and I don't know what the new council is going to look like.
No one does.
Will put the people's interest above the special interest. Maybe I'm wrong. We see that. Well, we see that problem all over the place. Okay.
We
see. What is it now that a U.S. senator needs $80 million to $100 million to even think about a campaign? I was warned not to go into this race by a sitting supervisor in the county who said, unless you got $60,000, don't even bother.
I don't know about that.
Oh, I've had the conversation.
Yeah.
I've been told that my rivals have built up over a period of several years war chests of $50,000, $60,000.
People will have war chests. Yes. Absolutely.
I'm going into this. The press release I just gave you this morning, which I'm sending out today, talks about that specifically. The only way to avoid special interests is not take money from special interests. I will take money only from individuals. And individuals within the community are clearly within the community. It's hard to say because I almost wish I had it, because I got to buy some signs at some point in time, and I don't have the money to do that with. But here's where my own spiritual sense of things comes in. When things are meant to be, if you're on the right path, and if you're doing the right things, and if you're honest about it, the right things will happen. I needed to print some brochures. Suddenly I have the ability to do that. People have already begun to come forward individually, not representing any special interest, to help me out. It's been with small amounts, $20, $50, kinds of donations from individuals. When I first went into this, I talked to the police about it. I've talked also to the Napa Solano County Labor. I've talked to IBEW because I'm a union guy and I refuse to deny that. My father supported a family based on wages that were fair because he worked in a union.
Here's one for you, because you mentioned IBW, and I just want to interject something which plays to a question of fairness. When the city was desperate a little while back, and they came to IBW and said we need $3.6 million, and IBW, who are the lower paid employees in the city. I think there's only one IBW employee that makes a six-figure salary.
Yes, they are.
IBW said to the city, let us look at where we can do it. So we can do it in a way that is the most, the least hurtful to our membership. And IBW came back and came up with $3.6 million in savings for the city. While other groups of employees, specifically the police, took raises. Now, to me, when I look at principles of unionism, and you have one group getting raises and the other group taking draconian cuts, to me it speaks to fairness, and the fact that, quite frankly, that's very unfair.
I agree with you. It is unfair.
Yeah. So how will you address those kind of inequities?
Well, a leader better address the inequities, and there's understanding the dynamics of an organization. Let me finish my sentence.
Sure.
I asked those union people, I said, I would like to have an opportunity to go before your membership. Let them talk to me, let them question me, let them hear what I have to say, and then they as individuals, the rank and file, can decide how they would want to support me. The rank and file, that's what I want, and I've been told that that's exactly what will happen, that I will be invited, and other candidates will too.
Right.
I've asked the unions directly for no money. I've asked them for support in that way. And then in the end, if their membership wants to give me some money for signs and brochures, which I'm going to need, people have to know me. They know the rivals because they've been here for years and years and years in town. They have to at least know my name and have an opportunity to look at my website. The problem with organizations.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is,
you ask about the cuts and the fairness.
Go ahead.
A union, like any other organization, when you're paying an executive director, you're paying officers in a union to protect the interest of their membership. And what happens with any organization, and whether it's a government or whether it's a union organization, is they become self-centered and self-focused, and they lose perspective on, say, let's just use as an example the police union with Matt Mustard. The union is interested in their membership,
of course,
and the IBEW is interested in their membership. A leader who can get above that can say, look, we had better all sit down and find solutions to this, because an organization eventually becomes self-perpetuating and interested in only survival within itself, and that's an enormous problem. We mentioned religions in the beginning. That's a problem with religions. They lose sight of a larger perspective of a global view. Right. So a leader needs to bring that global view to play. I hope that answered your question.
Okay. Well, just kind of in closing, Sean, what do you think is the greatest strength of Vallejo?
It's people, like you. Okay. I'm serious. I mean, it's been very interesting. I have not had a chance to sit down opposite anybody who would really grill me as you just did. I think it's been fantastic.
Well, it's been good.
And you can do some off camera as well.
And hearing your ideas, and I thank you very much for sitting down with me.
It's been my pleasure. And as I said, when the cameras are off, grill me some more, because I learned years ago to try and control my ego. It's hard because we need an ego, otherwise we're a basket case. We need an ego, but how do you control it enough to listen to other people? And that's what I hope at my tender age of 66 I've learned how to do.
I think that's the right attitude.
It is right. Sure. That's why I ask you to post the stuff on your site, because I love the bloggers. I wish some of them would get...
It gets a little harsh sometimes, but it's...
yeah, it makes you think.
Makes you think.
And drives you. So that's fine. Let them blog away.
Yeah. Well, Sean, thanks again. Thank you.